Hi, Rusty Nail here with you once again for another show and tell. And I wanted to share with you this nasty, grotesque zombie that was sculpted and produced by Moses Jaen a few years back. I've always loved this piece. I sell a lot of what I do to commissions and private collectors, but this one of the few that I kept because it's such a awesome representation of a nasty, gnarly zombie. I mean, he's included just about every kind of detail you can think of, which he's really well known for. Get a little look here before I start into the details of what I've done. The big thing people notice about this figure is, bam! Isn't that terrible? That's awful. Yes, indeed, it is awful. And when people look at this figure and they look around it, I love seeing their eyeballs pop out of their head when they see that. Anyway, thought that was an added touch that he did that was signifying of Moses. Okay, we'll get right into the figure, kind of what I've done and what my vision was. So like I said, my vision for this figure was something that was grotesque and gnarly, like you've seen on The Walking Dead, those guys. Those zombies usually were really, really nasty looking. So this is what I was going for, just a real nasty, realistic looking look. I'd done this several years ago, early on in my modeling days of larger figures, and I look at it today and I'm like, man, there was so much detail in this figure. I don't know how you could go wrong painting it anyway. So I chose to go for a bruised, fresh kind of zombie, but going into the putrefaction. This is the base that come with it, but I added dirt and some weeds and stuff like that. The guts did come with it. Early on, like I said, in my modeling days, I would have done, if I was to do it now, I would have done these intestines and entrails a little different. But, you know, for what I did back then, they were okay. They're a little too red. There's some dripping everywhere from, boo-hoo! Anyway, one more close up there. What I did with this figure is I started out and I started out basing it in just flesh, just normal human looking flesh, and man, I threw everything in the world at this thing. After that, I went through and I did some spattering and some modeling that most people do, and then on top of that, I did another layer of natural skin tone over that, and then I went in with shadows, and the shadows were blues, purples, and greens underneath here. Now I'm explaining the early stages, but this, of course, is the final representation. So I added a lot of oil washes. What you see in here and all that stuff, that's all oil washes. Oil washes and a lot of watercolor washes were used in this too. This is before I discovered the Citadel washes. But I do like oil washes because they lend really well to blending of the washes. This here, this staining area right in here, was done with pastels. The pants were painted in oil paint. They were first laid down with a base coat of khaki tan acrylic, and over that I made a khaki tan oil color, spread it over there real thin, and then I went in with some shadows and highlights and oil paint. And then while the oil paint was wet, I threw in a lot of oil washes on top of that to make it look grimy. And I threw some pastels in there when the oil paint was wet, and let them dry in there. Down in here is a lot of watercolor washes that I did on the feet. That's where he got shot or something. The soil was painted with just raw umber and dry brushed with some lighter browns, and the tree stump was already part of the base, and it was based out in black, and then raw umber and grays were dry brushed on top of that. The guts were painted in pink flesh, and then washes of reds were washed over it and glazed over it. Tamiya red was also used. I would go through, if I had to do it again today, like I said before, and I would use less of the washes and of the red and let more of the pink shine through, because that's more of a true representation of intestines. I had a lot of fun doing this. A lot of fun. This was, like I said, several years ago. And I don't think this is available anymore. But if you can find one, get one. It's just, they're awesome. Awesome figures. I did do, with this one, I did take a stain, walnut stain, like a furniture walnut stain, and I did go over this figure in certain places that I wanted it real dark, like down in here and areas like that. And I just put the stain over it, let it sit for a few seconds, and then I wiped it off with a clean rag. And then if you shoot that stain like Minwax stain, once you wipe it off, if you shoot it with some dull coat, something like that, it solidifies the stain and seals it right there. So I did do that. I just remembered me doing that there. Like I said, I did a lot of extra detail in this thing. I just went to town on this. Really went to town. Well, that's it. That about covers it. This is, I called this Zombie Walk. And this particular one won a gold at Wonderfest and several years ago, one of my first golds at Wonderfest. I was very excited. Now, real quick, the tongue there, that's more a representation of what I would have done with the intestines. Just wanted to throw that in there. See the teeth. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this show and tell and maybe learned a few things. I have learned a lot since then, and a lot of times I go back and reference this figure because I think I've done a really good job Not bragging on myself, don't get me wrong, but I think I've done a good job. Good enough job to actually go back and reference what I did. So, anyway, that'll happen. Sometimes you paint a piece and you're like, man, that was so good. I don't know if I could achieve that now. And maybe that's one of the pieces that I'm looking at right now. Anyway, like I said, hope you enjoyed, and take care. Happy modeling.